All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are here with another community conversation. This is week 13 and community conversation number 12 here in our Intro to Social Design course. This is again sponsored by the Siebel Center for Design at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I'm Brandon. I'll be a co-moderator for the discussion today, but really excited to have a couple of special guests in the house, two UIUC alums as well. So packed agenda for today. We're going to get just the overview stuff done in the next couple of minutes. We'll introduce our special guests, and then we've got a bunch of Q&A that's lined up. As always, if you're out there in the audience, if you've got questions, feel free to use the chat, and we'll try to make this as much of a dialogue and a family conversation and not a monologue, just so that everybody's included. So just a quick intro. I'm Brandon Middleton. I wear three hats typically. By day, I work at AWS, the cloud computing company, working with fintech startups. And in the middle, I've got a full house, a couple kids, three kids, been married for a little while now. And then the third is community Brandon. Really excited to be able to do social impact and community organization work in my spare time. And yeah, without further ado, I want to fast forward one slide and kick it over to my co-instructor for the class, Bert. Popcorn over to you, man.
Hey, all. I'm Bert Chong. I am a lecturer at Siebel Center for Design, and I teach a lot of the courses, including this one that I co-teach with Brandon, DTX 210. Some things about my design background, or I guess background in general. I am an amateur typeface designer, so you see some letters there in the middle. And I did a lot of my undergrad stuff in interactive arts. So that's why you see like a piano and stuff. Back to you, Brandon.
Awesome. Thank you, Bert. Fascinating stuff. And this is one of the slides I love before we get into talking about our special guests. So many different nonprofits that have been doing great work for years. And we get the opportunity to feature and showcase and highlight and talk to some of the operators of some of these organizations that are here on the slide. So some of them are local and neighborhood only. Some of them are national and have multiple offices across the country and the world. But the idea for social design is marrying social impact and the good work that organizations like these are doing, and then marrying that with the practices of human-centered design and design thinking, and talking about, if you merge those two things together, how you take all that good intent that you might have in your heart and actually operationalize it for the benefit of the community. So yeah, this is just a cross section of some of who we've talked to so far. We've got a couple more weeks in the semester left, but yeah, really excited to be able to partner with some of these orgs, and probably many more in the future. So without further ado, I want to shift over to a couple of minutes of intro for each of our esteemed guests today. Mama said ladies first, so I'm coming at you first. If you want to just give us kind of your name, your background, where in the world you are, what in the world you're focused on these days. Just take a couple minutes to say hello to the people.
Yeah, I just want to start off, Brandon, again, just saying thank you for this opportunity to be a part of this conversation. And thank you all for everyone who showed up to listen to me have a conversation about Let's See. But my name's Addai. I'm a licensed civil engineer, born and raised in Chicago. And at some point in middle school, I had a crazy idea that I was going to be the next Frank Lloyd Wright. Have no idea where that came from. And that led me to the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, where I studied civil engineering and met some of these great people on the call. And since then, I started my career in large commercial construction, building convention centers and high rises, doing some really cool work in the construction space. And in 2008, 2009, the market drastically changed. And so I had to change with it. And I had an awesome opportunity to work with a small design firm in Chicago. There were about 5 of us, and got my introduction to design and fell in love. And particularly got a chance to do design around public schools and ADA design improvements, so making spaces accessible to people with all levels of abilities. And that was great. And in 2012, I got my engineering license. I became a PE, and I said, oh, what am I supposed to do now? Right? And met a fellow Illini civil engineer who had a small design firm called the Rodder Group at the time. His name's Rashad Johnson. And at that time, I became his 6th employee. And since then, we've gone to over 250 employees in 5 states. And it's been an awesome ride. So I guess a little bit of what I do here now is I'm a director for the group. I manage a group of about 35 designers and engineers who do a variety of design work, everything from ComEd distribution design for those of us who are worried about the, the power system and how we all make sure we have the power we need and resiliency in the system we need, to site civil design. So anything from a school parking lot to expansion of a existing metro or CTA station. We do a lot of that work. So just to give you a little bit of an intro to what I do every day.
That's
I'll
amazing.
pass the mic.
Yeah, we'll pass the popcorn over to Dr. Henderson now. And, again, if you've got questions for either of them as they kind of unpack and unwrap some of what they've experienced over time, feel free to cue those things up. Popcorn over to you, Dr. Henderson.
All right, awesome. Once again, thanks, Brandon, for the invite. And you said it was a family conversation. So when I go home to North Carolina, none of my family members call me Dr. Henderson. So you got to call me Jerrod. And I started that already with, I grew up in North Carolina. I think later on, you might ask us about our origins, but from growing up in a small town in North Carolina, I ended up going to Morehouse College, and I got a chemistry degree from Morehouse, which was one of my dreams. I wanted to go to a HBCU for undergrad, and I had an opportunity to do a dual degree engineering program. So I spent 3 years at Morehouse and got a chemistry degree, and then 2 years at North Carolina A&T and got a chemical engineering degree. And from there, one of my NSBE friends, National Society of Black Engineers friends, she went to University of Illinois to get a master's in architecture. And I happened to go up there to visit her, and I had such a blast. I said, you know what, I got to go there for grad school. So went to Illinois for grad school, where I got my master's and PhD in chemical and biomolecular engineering. And I ended up staying there, and I taught at Illinois for 6 years. After I completed my PhD and decided that it was time for change, wanted to kind of reinvent myself. And I thought I was going to be moving back home to North Carolina or somewhere in the mid-Atlantic region. So DC down. Ended up applying to a job here at University of Houston. They made an offer that I could not refuse to come down here and be a part of their first year engineering program, to build the program. It was new at the time in 2016. The chemical engineering department found out that I was here, and they stole me away. So I'm now an assistant professor in the chemical engineering department. And I'm also the director of a program here in our college. Most universities that have a program similar to this, they would call it a minority engineering program or MEP program. Our program is called the Program for Mastery in Engineering Studies, and that's because I live in Texas, and and there are all kinds of barriers when you start to single out and call things minority here in Texas. So it was rebranded in the early 2000s, but that's the goal. And this program is open to all students in our College of Engineering. It's a support program for those students. And so kind of last bit, literally, this probably sounds corny to some of y'all, but when I was growing up, my grandfather, he and his brothers, tobacco farmers. My grandmother, she worked at a cleaners for like over 20 years. And they used to say this literally, like, the thing about finding a job you love to do, you never work a day in your life. And I'm like, yeah. But really, as an adult, I love coming to work. I actually love it so much that I live on campus. My third and final hat that I'll highlight around this this notion of designing and designing your life, designing your brand. Faculty members are charged with being good at teaching, research, and service.
Mhm.
And so I don't look at those three buckets, if you will, as distinct buckets. I've tried to blend my buckets as much as possible. So the service that I'm doing is having an impact with my teaching, and it's also impacting my research so that I'm getting publications from the things that I love to do service-wise. And I'm getting publications out of the innovative things that I think I'm doing in the classroom. But I'm a faculty in residence. That's the last hat. So each of our residence halls has a faculty member that lives near the residence halls. And so our apartments are connected to those residence halls. And we host one program a month, very similar to what we're doing now. Sometimes it's face-to-face, sometimes it's virtual, but I bring in presenters from across the country to talk to the students that live in the residence hall that I live near. So that's it for opening remarks.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. And back in the day, like we're all part of this National Society of Black Engineer organization that Jerrod called out. And my memory as an adult is getting worse, but there are three things that NSBE was focused on, and it was excelling academically, succeeding professionally, and positively impacting the community. And they were a part of my community very early on. And those three things were driven home so much that even to this day, you know, many years later, they're still part of what I remember, but more importantly, what we do in the community to try to, you know, evangelize STEM, to set a good example for the next people that are coming up after us. So yeah, just wanted to call that out, that was a cool kind of point of connection for us while we were on campus. And then even to this day, it's good to hear that it's still important and you're still moving towards those goals. So I appreciate the intros. Again, keep the commentary in the chat coming. And to kick off the conversation, I would love to hear kind of the origin story. Amma, we'll come to you with this question. Like, what was it like trying to invent yourself as the female version of Frank Lloyd Wright as a little girl? Like, how did that all come together? It didn't seem like it was a straight line necessarily. So take us
Not
back
at
to the
all.
neighborhood and give us a little bit of the context and the background there.
So, well, my origin story, right? So I'm first generation American. My family, the beginning of my origin story starts in the West Africa. So that's a big one for me. So we're tribal folks. So I'm always about tribe and community. That's a big part of who I am. Grew up in Hyde Park. And at some point we passed a building that I thought was probably the most interesting building I'd ever seen. And asked about it. And somebody said, oh, it's a Frank Lloyd Wright building. So I was blessed to live in a neighborhood that had a building designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, right? And from there, I thought I was going to be an architect, and then architecture led me to civil engineering. And so it's a super long and twisted story from there. But you know, my joy about building things and seeing things in the real space has always been the center of my motivation. And it's funny that we're having a lot of conversation about community, but all the work I do is in the community, right? So whether it's your sidewalk in front of your house, or it's the water to your school, or it's making sure the roads are safe for your school bus, you know, that's the space I work in now. You know, that's a little bit of my origin story. I'm not going to bore you guys with all the twists and turns, but it's a little bit of what drives me and where my core is.
Yeah. Let's go over to you, Jerrod, with that same question. Like, what was the neighborhood like? What was the family dynamic like? And how did that like serve as inputs to who you've become today?
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. As I alluded to, I grew up in North Carolina. I grew up in a very small town. When I was growing up there were about 30,000 people. Was it less than the size of our Illinois campus?
Right.
30,000 people. So everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew my grandmother. So I got in trouble a lot. Like, I'm gonna call Miss Eunice. That was my grandmother's name. And I was the practice child for my aunts and uncles. I'm the oldest nephew. And so a couple of my aunts and uncles were still in the home when I was born. And so they were my babysitters. And I had a particular aunt who, you know, she takes credit for my PhD. When I was in 4th grade, she was still at home. And every day after school, when I would come home from school, she would actually grade and check every single one of my homework problems. And they all had to be right before I could go outside and play. Like my friend's banging on the door. She's like, no, he's not ready. You know, he's still got some more math problems to get out. And so she really taught me this work ethic. And I went to, I heard you say this, middle school. I went to my first engineering conference in middle school, the Black Engineer of the Year Awards, which back then it used to be held in Baltimore every year. But there was a guy who I consider a mentor in our community, and his wife. They said, literally, like, the kids in this community, we want to expose them to colleges. So they would take us to open houses, and he was an engineer with AT&T. And so they would load us on buses, our parents, us, we would fundraise by selling Krispy Kreme donuts. But every year we would take this trip to Baltimore. And so being a community raised child, again, raised by my aunts and uncles, my parents, but the community had a hand in raising me. And I think I might have got the first piece of that. In my community, it takes a village to raise a child, because literally the neighbors, we could get in trouble by the neighbors as well. We would get in trouble from them, and then get in trouble from our parents. And so I didn't appreciate it as much growing up, but, you know, as an adult, I'll often reflect back on those memories. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, just to give a little bit of interaction in the chat for the students and the community members, put the major or the focus of your studies or what you're about to graduate in, or that, just so that Jerrod and Amma have a sense of what y'all are doing. They came out as engineers, but you know, we've got a pretty diverse group here.
Nice.
And I'll move over to the next question. Just in like the day-to-day, currently where you are, Amma, give me a sense of what it is to, I have this picture of you walking around with a bunch of blueprints and a hard hat, maybe. Like, give us a real sense of what the day in the life is like and how varied it is. I'm sure you do a bunch of different things.
It's varied. That's a great thing. So that's a great point. So for me, because where my positioning is now with the company, it is very varied. So it can be anything from client calls, which is a big part of my job, which is trying to find out and pull out of a client what they're looking for, right? So we have to meet specs and regulations, but when you turn a design over to a client, you want to give them what they're looking for. So yes, they wanted a sidewalk, but what are some of their concerns with that sidewalk? They wanted an extension to a school, but what were some of their concerns? So I spent a lot of time on calls with clients, trying to understand what their concerns are and how I can address them. I'd spent a lot of time mentoring and coaching young engineers. So that can look in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's somebody coming in my office, closing the door and asking a question about how to word an email or make a design solution. Sometimes my coaching is in the way of QA, QC. So actually looking through a design, making comments, making suggestions, things like that. And like you mentioned, sometimes I'm out on the site. So sometimes I'm pulling on my boots and my hard hats and I'm doing a walk down on or a bridge inspection or checking out a new potential improvement. But at the end of the day, everything I'm doing is a form of communication, right? So it's something that they said to us when we were in school and I didn't get it, right? I didn't get it. But everything I do is a form of communication, right? So when I'm doing a set of plans, I'm communicating to someone who's gonna build it later what they should build, right? If I'm sending emails, if I'm talking to clients, if I'm doing anything, it's all very different types of communication. So I speak lots of different languages to lots of different clients and lots of different people. But yeah, that gives you a little bit of insight of what my day looks like. Yeah.
Super interesting. And we've had students just this week come off of project presentations where they were focused on interviewing and storytelling and synthesizing the data that have come from those interviewees. So you're definitely speaking their language when you talk about having to shift from context to context and kind of talk to audience A a little bit different than audience B, a little bit different than audience C. So yeah, I love that focus also on coaching. And I want to transition over to Jerrod for this one, because so much of your work, even when you were on campus and all the way through the years, has been focused on kind of coaching, mentoring, illuminating kind of possibility for the next generation. So talk to us about maybe where that came from, and then some gems, some insights, some tips about how you've improved kind of your outcomes as it pertains to that area.
Man, that was a lot. I think, thanks for the like interlude. I often call what the way that I communicate as being a conductor. And I hope that the music sounds good, but but conductor. So whatever hat I'm wearing, whether that's in the classroom or as the director of promise or as a faculty in residence or mentoring my undergraduate and graduate student researchers or my postdoc, who's a very grown adult, there are rehearsals that are going on. And one of the things I've learned, and I'm making this analogy of being a conductor, but one of the things I've learned is listening to the band, right? And so a lot of my research is around Black males and our experiences with engineering and our experiences with STEM and mentoring and coaching. So first of all, just showing up. And right now, unfortunately, in 2022, I'm the only Black male engineering faculty in our College of Engineering. And we've got 3 Black women in our College of Engineering. But just showing up and being that aspirant model for them is important, but then also listening to them and listening to their specific needs. Because I found as a faculty member, oftentimes we think we have ideas of what our students need, and we implement programs and we implement things and strategies in the classroom without engaging them. And so a big part of me and as wanting to become and be a transformational leader is to listen to the band, listen to what their specific needs are, and then try to adjust to that. So I'll stop there and see if there are any specific questions related to that. But
Yeah,
every day is fun.
Yeah, I can imagine how varied it is. And I know myself, I like to get a little bit of variety in there to mix it up. So it sounds like there's plenty of that for both for both of y'all. I saw one come in from Bert. You want to come off mute, Bert, and ask that one?
Yeah, as a lot of our audience are people who still have some college to go through, I'm wondering if you could each share one STEM and one non-STEM class from college that sticks with you to this day and why it does. Maybe it's something that the students can fit in before they graduate.
You want to start us off?
Yes. Okay. I'm going to start with my non-STEM one. Okay. I don't even know if they still offer this, but they used to offer a half semester of ice skating. I don't know if they still offer that, but if they do it, right? It was great. One thing I kind of used it because I had a difficult semester that semester and I had to drop some classes and it kept me at 12 credit hours. That's the first one. The second one was, it was a great relief from all of the craziness that was happening with me north of Green, right? So if they still have it, the ice skating class was great for me. And that always sticks with me because it was just such a distraction from some of the other things I had going on. Yeah, it's a great class game. STEM class, actually, I think the STEM class that always will stick with me was a TAM class. My first theoretical applied mechanics class, because that class for me was the first time I felt like, you know what, maybe I can be here, right? It was a class I did well in. It was my first, felt like first engineering class, and it always stuck with me because it reaffirmed for me that I might be in the right place, right? When sometimes you kind of have other messages that tell you other things, right? So that would be a STEM class that stuck with me, and a non-STEM class that always sticks with me.
Excellent. Excellent to know that ice skating class is still out there too. Jerrod, let's go over to you.
Yeah. So for the STEM course, same deal. My first real chemical engineering class when I got to North Carolina A&T. At some schools, they call it material and energy balances. At other places, they call it chemical processes. But turns out it's an algebra class in disguise. And once you figure that out, so many students drop the course before they figure out it's not calculus, it's not differential equations, it's word problems about a chemical plant, and it's algebra that you had in 8th grade. And when the light bulb went off or came on, I was like, yeah, this is it. And so from then on, I've told a story about how I fell in love, my first love, and her name is Kimmy, chemical engineering, Kimmy. And then the non-STEM course is a theater class that I had at North Carolina A&T. Getting away from the engineering side of campus and making friends with other folks and learning. I often joked about, we had this activity, we had to do a monologue, and the professor was coming in there asking us, like, who is this person and what is their background? And I'm like, what are you talking about? So you had to create a character and get into character. I thought that was so fun after I figured out, and so now I enjoy talking to people about acting. I would probably never pursue it, but to have had that course, it was fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna prompt the audience to throw into the chat the name of their favorite course that they've taken on campus so far, just to give a little bit of variety. And I know for myself, when I was on campus, the one that I didn't think that I would enjoy, that I enjoyed a lot, was Swahili. I took like 5 semesters of Swahili and don't remember as much of it as I should, but I remember, Jerrod, to your point, like there just being so many different people in there. There were some of the sports teams in there, basketball and football. There was just some of all the majors that I didn't get to interact with a whole bunch on campus. And then within the engineering kind of umbrella, I remember MATSE, material science. It was the first engineering course that I ever took and got like an A+ in. All my ECE courses were like A- and B's of some kind. So the one MATSE course that I took was the only one I ever like mastered and got A+ in. So let's see what's coming into the chat. This class, thank you, Maxine. I will pay you when I see you. Okay, we got CS 125 from David. Black Chorus, very cool, very cool. We had an amazing Black Chorus. That just reminds me of like all those concerts for Christmas time and graduation time. Some psych classes in here, urban transportation and planning. So yeah, thank you for going with me on that one. And I'll transition back over to some of the questions, and just as a prompt, if y'all have some more as we keep going, feel free to put them into the chat and you can come off mute and ask them. But let's talk a little bit about design and how it snuck up on you into the work stream, or how like maybe you've had some formal training. Like design is a funny thing depending on who you're talking to. So let's start with you in terms of like, how did you educate yourself about it, or how did it come into your purview? And then how do you think about design and how do you use it today?
Man, come on, these questions.
Right.
So, what? Okay, Brandon. So it snuck up on me is correct, right? So one thing I didn't mention was I thought I was going to be a professor. I thought I was going to be like you and Jerrod. Like I had no intention of going into the workforce, right? And got my first job and my first paycheck and said, okay, changes. But I got really blessed. I had an amazing mentor when I first got into design. Like I said, I started with a small firm. There were only 5 of us, and she was a woman engineer. She was a Black woman engineer. It was amazing for me, right? That's a rare thing for me, at least. And you know, it was 2 parts. One, she kind of threw me in the deep end, just said, "You're smart enough, figure it out." So that's the first part of design for anybody when you get in the workforce. You're smart enough. You're going to get thrown into the deep end and you will figure it out. But the beautiful thing was too, was that she gave me lots of feedback and lots of, you know, my first design drawing, I think it looked like the paper was bleeding. I had red lines everywhere and, you know, my ego was hurt, right? But the trick for me was I took all those notes and I made sure I never saw those notes again. And so for me, design snuck up in a way that it became my challenge. I did not want to see any more comments. I did not want to see any more red lines. So I had to master it really quickly. And yeah, it snuck up on me and became a passion of mine because I could solve problems. I could actually solve problems. And then I can go see them get built, and then people would use them and they wouldn't even know that I was in the background and I solved that problem. So I don't know if that answered your question because it was a deep question,
No,
but
it
that's
does.
how design snuck up on me.
Yeah, I know that like design thinking as a practice and human-centered design, if you go back 20 years ago, like there weren't so many people, you know, talking about it and not as many courses and that kind of thing. So, you know, for people who have been working for a little while, again, it might not have been part of what, you know, your daily classes had in them or not even
Not
a
at all.
consideration. So same question for you, Jerrod, like how have you come to interact with and think about design as it pertains to kind of your field, being an actual professor and focusing on STEM topics and pushing students in the next generation towards it?
Good deal. Yeah. Thanks for the question. So I'll just kind of start with just throughout my life. I've been a person that has started various things and projects. I might categorize that as a builder. And, you know, some stuff worked, some stuff didn't. I'm like the founder of a number of things. I started a gospel choir in my hometown when I was in high school. I'm a founder of an after-school program that exists in Houston and Illinois. And you know, a lot of times I was doing that without a design approach. Just like, oh yeah, I have this idea, let's do it. Later on, you know, through trial and error, I learned to think more systematically about the approaches and making sure I had rationale for those decisions. And also making sure that that rationale, which I think gets at what we've been talking about today, especially to Amos' point about language and communication, speaking the language of whoever the stakeholder is. So when I'm talking about this after school program and communicating with the elementary school principals, I don't have to wear my academic hat to that. I need to talk about boots on the ground. How will this program impact their 4th and 5th grade students that we're trying to push it to? As a researcher, I'm designing research projects. So for my students and getting funding for these projects. So I have these ideas, but I have to design. And oftentimes, you know, the first line of defense is to be able to sell this design or this project in a 1-pager. It's an overview. Then what are the broader impacts of that work? And what is the intellectual merit of that project? And most often I get my funding from National Science Foundation, and this is what they want to know. And so before I ever complete a 15-page proposal or submit a 15-page proposal, I get this 1-pager. And if I'm happy about this 1-pager and confident in it, I send it to the program officers there as I'm designing my project and ask them, would this be something that they would be willing to fund? And if they're like, yeah, and they normally will give you feedback. And then I go, you know, write this up and design it. And then someone else does the work. And had I known that that's what professors do, earlier on, I probably would have started my tenure track journey sooner.
Mm.
I just knew as a grad student, I was lonely working in the lab and I didn't want that life, but I was passionate about working in the classroom. And so I pursued at first a instructional role, which is more about just being great in the classroom. Now I literally draw stuff on the board, write a one pager, see if I can sell the idea, and then my students go do the work and make me famous.
Yeah, I love it. And I mean, I was oblivious to that notion when I was on campus, and to work backwards from something that you already understand is a lot different than kind of swinging in the dark. And it's cool to hear you also talk about how iterative of a process it is, so that as design thinkers and like human-centered design practitioners, we're very familiar with the idea that we can have an idea, put a minimum viable product out there that doesn't have to be perfect. It's just a V0 or just a V1. You get some feedback from your customers or from kind of the experimentation phase, and then you bring it back, you iterate on it, and you put it out again with the feedback incorporated into that next version. So yeah, I think we're all picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah.
And
Can I
yeah,
add to that? Even on the backside of that, so after a project has been conducted in our group, and we submit to journals, these peer reviewed journals. So now my peers have a hand in shaping the dissemination of that work. And in our group, we call that co-constructing knowledge.
Mhm.
And that has been impactful, learning how to even communicate with these blind reviewers. So
Yeah, that's another point about when it could be a win for not just yourself. I think if you include multiple stakeholders and everybody at the conclusion of the thing feel like they, were victorious along with you, I think that's a bar or a little key that I don't know that I understood early on in my career when I was trying to like do everything myself, not include many people. But this whole notion of community and collaboration and inclusion so that the team wins and not just you is something that I think the sooner you figure it out, the better it is. And I would imagine like the design field that you're in is like this. You can't build a building unless you talk to the neighborhood, there's so many different stakeholders, I would imagine.
That's
Uh,
right. Well,
any
I hope Asia is okay. She said she had to step out. Sorry, Asia. Yeah, there's lots of input. So I think which was really interesting about what both of you guys are saying, is that when you're in the academic space, at least in the classroom, you have one or two variables, and then got a couple equations, and at the end you spit out an answer.
Mhm.
Right? What both of you guys are saying that is so in line with what the design process is that you start off with one set of variables and you create what you call a V1. For me, it might sound like a 30% design drawing set, right? Then everybody looks at that, and all of a sudden it becomes clear to everyone there's some other issues that weren't clear before, right? So you start getting more input, and every iteration of that gets clearer and clearer and clearer. And is what we like calling about being in flow. It happens in the design world too with your team. If you've ever played competitive sports with a team and you've ever been in flow with your team and you guys are winning, right? Sometimes you have those moments on this side too. And those are the moments I live for, right? And then like Jerrod said, at the end, somebody builds it and you're like, oh man, remember we were in that page turn and we knocked all these problems out. Yeah, so no, I love that. Thank you guys for sharing that. It's so in line with what I felt. Those moments in the design are really awesome when you're in flow with a whole bunch of folks with different perspectives. Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah. So I wanted to take the conversation to a little bit of a different point, but it's still kind of work related. Where in the world or where that you wouldn't expect to have gone has your career or your studies like taken you? Like some of you in the audience probably are thinking one way about your career and your future, and you're kind of scripting it out. And the way that it's going to turn out will be like so much different than what you could have imagined. So Jerrod, I'll go to you, and then we'll flip over to Alma. Like, talk about what's been surprising to you, like where you've gone that you could not have imagined as little Jerrod in North Carolina.
Oh man. So first of all, I believe that my steps are ordered, right? So that kind of takes a little bit of like I actually believe that could have gotten here. But I think the path here is what was surprising to me. As I mentioned earlier, I knew I was great, or I thought I was great in the classroom. I just wanted to teach, teach, teach. But as I started to build out my service and build out my research, I was getting all this, feedback from others and department chair even saying, hey, you're doing stuff that tenure track faculty do. Why aren't you tenure track? And so, very soon I'll put in my paperwork to go up for tenure, right? And that's a thing. Um, and so I actually had no desire to be a tenure track faculty. So that would be kind of I guess, a surprise. But when I set my mind on it, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's going to happen. So that, and then the fact that I've been able to just do lots of things, and I call it dream up things and have the support of my immediate supervisors. I'll say, hey, I want to try this. They're like, okay, sure, write it up, do it, let us know how it goes. And so to have that freedom, and that's been another, I guess, to answer your question, like a surprising thing. So
Yeah. Same question for you, Alma. I know it's been a little bit of windy and twistiness, but I'm sure it's been fun.
Oh, it's been lots of fun. I mean, I just like Jerrod said, I love coming to work. It's I did not believe people when they said that, but it's real. When you find the right place for yourself. I'd say the most surprising thing, place I've gotten was, for me, I would say, being a young girl in an immigrant household, your voice is not always listened to. I don't say that in a disparaging way, but sometimes you're taught to be very quiet, right? Listen to your elders, we're very traditional sometimes. And the place that I have gotten now that is, I think, the most surprising to me, kind of like what Jerrod said, is I'm in a space where my voice can make influence, right? I have a little corner of the world where I can make impact with my voice. And that was a huge thing for me. I get to be in the spaces making decisions on jobs that really are going to change the landscape of my city, right? I get to be in the room with the decision makers, right? And so that is something that's probably been the biggest surprise for me. And in that room, I can say things that people listen to and give value. And now it doesn't surprise me, but there were definitely moments early on, I was like, wow, they just listened to what I said, like, right? It comes with things. You've got to gain some mastery and some things behind you to lend credence to your voice. But I'd say that's the biggest surprise about where I've landed, is that I have a little corner of the world where my voice has influence. Kind of like Jerrod, you make an impact on your students. Your voice is, and the things you do make direct impact to people. Yeah, that's probably the biggest surprise. I would have never seen. I would have never seen that when I was set on this path.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, like, what I would have scripted, it's even better today than what I could have imagined years and years ago. So it's good to, good to hear from both of you that the best is probably still yet to come. The next question that I have is about, after you put work down, or the place when you're not thinking about work and just trying to have fun and be a human being, everybody's got to have balance, right? So we could do like a lightning round of hobbies and like different things to get out of the work mindset, just things that you like to do in order to create that self-care, that balance that we all need, because we can't all be engineers or super into our major 100% of the time. So Alma, you answered the last one, so let's flip it over to Jerrod, then we'll come back to you. But yeah, that's the question on the table.
got it. I have a lot of interests. So travel,
Mhm.
I always say, people have their thing that they don't mind spending their money on, and so I don't mind spending my money on travel. Trying to, visit as many countries as possible. Um, 2020 slowed that down a little bit, but
Just a little
we'll
bit.
be back up and running in May. I'm going to Ghana. In December, I'm going to Australia. So we're back in there. But travel and then spending time with my family. I have a large extended family. Like I know first, second, third, fourth, and about to start knowing fifth cousins because my fourth cousin's having kids, right? But we do this thing every year called Cousins Weekend. And it's cousins from all sides of family, next door neighbors who consider themselves kin. We just pick a city and we all meet there for the weekend and hang out. So travel, spending time with family, and just here in the city with my friends. It's really simple. We'll, every couple of weeks, we'll just pick a place. Everybody will show up. And this is a student thing. So we have fun when we show up for happy hour. There we go. Yeah.
Very cool. I'm gonna pass that same question over to you, Ama.
So similar, travel is huge for me. Huge. Did get slowed down a little bit, and like Jerrod, I actually travel with my family when I can. I think our last big trip, we all went to the Dominican Republic. There was 21 of us. Me, my mom, my aunts, my cousins, our baby cousins, all for a week in the DR. And we really, when we travel, we like to experience, beyond resorts and things and try to get in and see what's happening culturally. Jerrod, enjoy Ghana. That's where my people are from. So you're gonna love it. And then, I'll be honest, I'm not nearly as balanced as I'd like to be. It is a skill that I am learning to put myself in that space and that mindset. But travel's huge for me. Having my people around me, and those people look different in different spaces, right? The people that support you, the people that love on you, and that's family, that's friends, that's, sometimes coworkers. Really making sure I'm intentional about engaging with them on a regular basis. Because sometimes, I don't know if it's like this for anybody else, but sometimes you get caught up in your head, you can isolate a little bit. So a lot of my self-care has to do with engaging with the folks that support me. So those are the things I like to do for fun.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I have to go. I have to go to Punta Cana next month. So I might have to text you on the side and figure out this is my first time out there.
Yes, I got ideas. I had a great time.
Okay.
I'm going to Puerto Vallarta in September. I've never been there before. I'm more of a Mexico City girl, so I'm going to see. We're going to see.
Yeah, that's a destination. That's a destination place for Houston people. They go to Puerto Vallarta a lot.
Okay. Okay.
I've never been, but yeah.
I'm excited.
I see another question in the chat here. Bert, you want to come off for that one?
Yeah, I figured we were talking about, balance and free time. So there's this implication that, we have limited bandwidth, or we try to limit things, right? And, with both of you being in managerial roles in some capacity, there's always stuff shouting for your time and your energy from all over. How do you choose which problems are the ones that you tackle and you work on?
That's a good question. I'll jump in. And I'll just take it from a workplace, but I use the same principle in my personal life, right? Because in your personal life, you'll have people calling for your attention as well. But for me, it's important that you understand the priorities and the core interests of your company or your client or the project, right? And that helps you prioritize what needs to get your attention. So perfect example, we're very, at our company, we're very employee focused. We really support our staff. So a lot of times staff may come before client in a moment, depending on what the issue is, right? So it really has to do with I pick my priorities based on where I am. So whether it's a company priority or client priority or project priority, and you're having to make those decisions all the time, that's how I pick it. But the only way that you can do that successfully is that you always have to have that in front of mind. You always have to be checking in with yourself, reminding yourself what the priorities are, adjusting them as needed. So yeah, I think it really just depends about what's the core values and priorities of the space that you're working in, and that will help you figure out how to put what first.
Yeah, for me, man, that's an area of growth. I'm still learning. I do have one rule most of the time, depending on who it is. If it's my mom, maybe not, but most other people, I give them either a couple hours or a day. And if it's still a problem, especially when people are calling you like, this is urgent. Oh my God, like most things are not urgent. And like I said, I'm still learning, better ways of doing that. But that has helped filter lots of people and lots of things. Yeah. So that's an area of growth for me. Yeah.
I think the last couple of years have forced us to like reevaluate that balance and to think about who we are personally versus who we are when we're kind of the employee or the business side. But yeah, it's a great question to not ask once, but to continually ask yourself and other people, I think. So thanks for seeding that one, Bert. Let's check the chat one more time if there's anything there. I don't see anything, so I wanted to ask one question about kind of the future and the things that you're hopeful for and hoping to see. So yeah, I'll start with you in terms of the brightest, most happy place that you could imagine, and some of the things that you're expecting to be able to experience for yourself, for maybe your community, for your family. It could be really, really broad, or it could be really, really specific, but interested to hear kind of your thoughts on that. Part of design is like, let's do the N+1, but let's also talk speculative and like, let's talk a decade or two out. So this is kind of in line with the speculative design idea, to just go way out there into the future and tell us what you'd like to see.
Okay. So I'll talk industry, and I'll just talk about something that I'm seeing that's happening in my industry that I'm really loving. So one of the things that's happening in my industry, and I hope that it really starts to move into the future, is that there are starting to be very focused projects to address some systematic issues that have been ignored for a while. So kind of like what Jerrod said, he said he's working specifically with Black males. It's a very specific targeted address, right? And it's starting to happen in the design space. And I'm hoping that people go there a little more too. That's my wish. Example I would give you is in the city of Chicago, there's some parts of the city that have historically not been invested in. And what is starting to happen is that people are starting to look at the cross section of all the things that may plague some of these issues, things that are related to mobility, things related to economics, things related to employment, and how those things cross over and how they align with the lack of investment that's happened in those areas. So as an engineer and a designer and somebody who works in development space, I am hopeful for a future where we will focus on the areas that have been not as invested in. It's starting to happen. It takes a while, but my hope is in 10 years that we will have really focused our work in the places and with the people who need us most, and that, we'll start to see the fruits of that focus. I don't know if that answers your question, but in the design space, that's something I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, it totally does. And yeah, I'm right there with you, hoping that we can kind of be more equitable and be more inclusive with the stuff that we're building and who we're building it for. So,
and if I could put a finer point on it, I think sometimes people think equitable and inclusive just means take the box and spread it all around. And sometimes equitable inclusive means you got to take the whole box and put it where nobody ever had before, right? And that is a difference of thought for some folks, and there can be pushback on that. Kind of like Jerrod said, it's difficult to have a space that where he can say, I'm focusing on supporting minority students. There may be pushback there. Equitable and can mean that you take pile and push it towards those who haven't had it. And it's a change of thought for some folks, but I think can be really impactful.
Yep. It's part of the work that a lot of the social impact orgs that we've had on display that they're doing. So we've got some good data points and some good role models and examples. But yeah, definitely more momentum in that area is something that we're hoping for. So thank you for that. I'll shift it over to Jerrod with the same question. Like, what are you optimistic about? What are you looking to see? What's the future look like with your rosy colored glasses on?
Man, it's interesting. Same thing, and y'all know it, y'all lived it. Same thing in academia. If I have to quote the percentage of women getting engineering degrees that hasn't changed in 20 years, again, at another presentation, or the percentage of Black men getting engineering degrees, yet there are all these efforts, and organizations like National Science Foundation are pouring billions of dollars into these efforts. I hope, to see improvement in those areas, as far as folks getting into pathways to become engineers. And I know it's a system problem. It's some people would use the word pipeline, but it's a pathway, and various pathways look different for folks. But I hope that folks are not continuing to work in their silos when addressing these types of problems, but thinking more on a continuum how we might address those problems. So, personally, locally here, like I said, before we started recording, I was talking about building an engineering education research center. Well, it's going to bring partners to the table. So school districts, teachers, families. Sometimes we leave those voices out when we talk about students coming to our institutions. And so that's one area that I'm passionate about. I will tell you, I went to the NSBE conference, the National Society of Black Engineers Conference, a couple of weeks ago. And I met so many folks from industry that talked about wanting to engage more with college students and being mentors to college students. And I met so many people that actually had titles of diversity and inclusion officers. And I was like, where did this title come from? I don't remember that many people at this many companies having that as their job.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's awesome to hear. And yeah, same like in the tech industry, like you've seen a bunch of resources poured into DEI, diversity and equity and inclusion and belonging and culture building. So yeah, I think to the students and the community members out there, you're hearing a lot of the same heart applied to kind of different parts in different industries there. So yeah, we appreciate that. I know we're top of the hour here, and just wanted to say a big thank you. I'll forward the slide. We've got a bunch of faces from last week's, and we'll that's my reminder to do a little selfie with our group here. So if you're listening and you're cool to come off of non-camera and on the camera, we're going to do our annual, or not our annual, our weekly selfie thing here. Let's see if I can get this working. All right, so I'll give y'all a 5 count. You can do this in 5 and 4 and 3 and 2 and in 1. Here we go. All right, cool. So this will conclude, for the most part, another community conversation. If there's any last pieces of feedback, feel free to put them into the chat. But I wanted to give Jerrod and Amma a last word, kind of 1 minute type of thing. If you wanted to say to the students, if you don't leave with anything else but this from the talk or from the conversation today, you can drop them off with one more gem or one more little bar. So Jerrod, I'll switch it up. I'll go to you first, and then we'll close it out with you.
excellent. yeah, around this notion of like design, I just want to encourage y'all that um, as it relates to your personal lives as well, you can design out in many ways, what you want your life to look like. And personally, yeah, a lot of times we focus, to that earlier question, we focus so much on career that there may be less balance than we like. I'm definitely guilty of that. Like I will live in this office if you give me a sleep pod. Um, but don't forget to design out those other personal goals. One example for me, if I were to share like something, um, it's a picture. Oh, it is when I go here. It's that, right? It's me jumping off of something. And for me, that's kind of like my takeaway, like even personal and in my personal life, like bet on myself. And a lot of times that seems scary, like jumping off of something with where am I gliding to? But make sure you invest time in yourself. We do it for others. And in my community, we're taught to be so altruistic and give back and reach back and pull someone else up. But sometimes we neglect ourselves. So be gracious to yourself and make sure you're designing your life as well.
Yep, wise words, wise words. Amma, same thing. Let's go over to you for just some
That's
last
killing me.
mic droppable. Go ahead and drop the mic on us.
No, it's great. It's so in line with what you were saying, Jerrod. I was just going to say, trust yourself and listen to yourself. There's a speaker named Abraham Hicks, and I listen to her a lot, and she talks a lot about alignment with source, whatever that source is for you. And that, if you align yourself with, source, that you will, and listen to yourself, you'll hear the things you need to hear. So prepare yourself. And when there's moments to be fearless, and trust yourself. That would be the thing I would have told myself if I were in your guys' seats, 20 years ago.
Just made me think of one last thing. I didn't ask you about podcasts or books or like things that you use to educate yourself. You just dropped a reference to.
Oh yeah, Abraham Hicks. She has these great little 15-minute snippets that I use sometimes when I get a little lost in my thoughts. Helps me get focused.
Any other podcasts or books to throw out there as recommendations for some young and inquiring minds out there?
Oh, not me. Let's see what Jerrod has.
I know. I'm thinking. Give me a sec. No. I have a life coach, so that's my person I listen to. I'm trying to think of anything I've been reading lately. Yeah.
All right, we can follow up on that one. I know I put you on the spot a little bit, but yeah, it made me think that if there was something out there that we could just drop into the chat or just throw out into the recording, that would be cool. But
just as a general note, one of the things I tell a lot of young people is right now we're in a place where there's just people are so transparent and open about themselves and their lives and things like that, is that for me, I'm always looking for influencers who are in a space that I want to be in. So if you're somebody who would like to have a family, follow family blogs. If you're somebody who wants to start a business, follow some entrepreneurs. There's nothing like seeing it mimicked, and people are so open and transparent now with what they've learned. That's generally how I pick what I'm listening to or reading.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, if you wouldn't mind, if you're a community member out there, throw some snaps or some claps or some emoji into the mix here to just say thank you to Jerrod and Amma. I appreciate both of y'all for saying yes. The alums have come back to campus digitally and virtually for an afternoon of fun here. So just on behalf of our group and the Siebel Center for Design, we want to say thank you. We'll be rooting for you in the future and hoping that we see all the good stuff coming from you, as well as our students and our community members here. And then, yeah, we'll close out the day like that. Everybody, like we always say, drink water, be safe, mind your business, have a great weekend, like all that good stuff. We will see all of y'all next time.